this? Yeah. All right, everybody. So, welcome to Immigrant Refugee Workgroup monthly meeting. We are so lucky to have two people with us from GAIN, the Georgia Asylum and Immigration Network. And what Melinda and Amir are going to do is give a presentation to us about their work, including how we might be helpful. But before we did that, Melinda and I were thinking it might be good if we had a sense of who's in the room here. And so, and I'm talking really short, friends, if you could say what work you are doing for immigrants and or refugees, or what work you might like to do. And I'm just going to call people as you are located on my screen, if that's okay. My name is Tara Doyle, and I'm working with Shop of Hope and Casa Alterna, and also I'm the co-lead of this marvelous group. Connie Rose, you're next on my screen.
So I'm doing El Refugio and the Shop of Hope, and want to do more, but I'm not sure exactly what. But what I'm really hoping is that, I don't know if it'll happen today or another day, I would love for if ICE will show up in big numbers in our community, that there's some group, some list already with a list out saying, you go here, you go there, you go to the schools, you go, et cetera, et cetera.
Honey, I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you offline
Sure.
about Heat Wave, which is doing exactly that.
Oh, okay, good.
Caroline Stover, can you talk to us even though you're driving?
Yes, I'm stopped at a light,
fortunately,
and yeah, I haven't been directly involved with IRW for a couple of months, being out of town and then coming home to mold remediation and all that, but consistently working with a lot of different groups. We're all advocating and supporting the release of Rodney Taylor, double amputee man, it's been over a year now when he was taken by ICE, and he's at Stewart Detention Center, experiencing just the worst conditions for any human being, and especially for someone with his medical conditions, complete neglect. And so I'll get with a lot of people after this to let you know what's coming up, but that's what I've been doing recently.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Carolyn. Welcome back. Dano, you're next.
Hi, my name's Dano McDonald, and let's see, I'm working at the Shop of Hope, and I am also the self-proclaimed den mother of the Bears for Kids group, and we are making homemade stuffed animal bears for the immigrant kids. Then we're giving those to Gloria and others to give to the kids in line and to give to the kids down at El Refugio. And we are really enjoying our work with the community.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dano. Uh-oh, we just lost someone. Well, they'll come back. Lou Bose, you'll have to unmute yourself, sweet. No, you're still muted.
There we go.
There we go.
No, I'm very impressed with the group of people you put together, Tara. I was very active in my younger days. I've been a little bit impaired, but I look after a few immigrant families. I've got my private relationships with them, and I was very attracted to listening to the lawyers today specifically on that. But if you ever want to go on my website, I'll be the first one sent down to El Salvador, I think, if they start checking social media too much. But I have a lot of information on there that I try to fact check. So it's under Lou Bose
Lou,
Facebook.
Will you put that in the chat, please? That would be super.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for what all you've been doing. It's fantastic. As I mentioned earlier, I've been down to the prison and all the things going on. So keep it up. We're going to have to struggle hard. And
Thank you, Lou. Thank you so much. Gloria.
Gloria Chu. I'm working with Casa Alterna in the court accompaniment 4 days a week, and actually starting this month, 5 days a week. We're down at the ICE field office, and we're standing in solidarity with folks who are coming for court hearings or check-ins, and occasionally we will accompany someone in for their hearing.
Thank you, Gloria. Thank you for that work. Tricia, are you able to unmute yourself? Yeah.
Hi. I'm new to, and so far have just done the bannering and just trying to learn as much as I can. I was at the Know Your Rights training yesterday, and so.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Wonderful. Jane.
Hi, I'm Jane Royal, primarily Avondale Action, and I can just catch you up on a few little things. We are privileged to have one of our speakers in our group, and so we're very glad about that. I personally have been working with International Rescue Committee and a friend in Brevard, North Carolina, to do mutual aid with 2 asylee families. And that has been very interesting to see the situation from their point of view.
Yes.
And in Avondale, we're gearing up for March 25, and to do as much action as we can on that day.
Are you saying No Kings 3?
Yes, no.
28th, March
Right.
28th. Wonderful. Thank
Okay.
you so much. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Martha Reese. You'll have to unmute.
Hi, everybody. My name is Martha. I'm unmuted now. And I've been doing service work on the El Refugio hotline for many years, but I mainly work with allies, and we work to make change happen, both at the local level by talking to our local people, as well as Immigrant Rights Thursdays. And I'm currently finishing collection of testimony of migrants who have returned to Mexico to see what and report on what they actually went through in detention. So, lot to do, something for everybody.
Thanks, Martha. Martha's zooming in from Mexico. Nicoletta.
Hi, everybody. Presently, I am volunteering for the Shop of Hope, and I am making bears for Casa Alterna and El Refugio. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicoletta. Manette.
Hi, I'm Manette Messenger. I'm working with Martha on Allies, where we interview elected people in law enforcement and talk to them about maybe what we could do a little better for immigrants. And this 3-month period, we're focused on the state legislature since it's in session. And they're remarkably clever about burying anti-immigrant stuff in otherwise innocuous bills. So that was a big learning curve for me. And I also volunteer at the Shop of Hope once a week.
Thank you, Manette. Tracy. And since we've had new people come in since we started, we're simply very quickly saying how we're involved with immigrant or refugee work, or how we might want to be involved. So Tracy, if you could unmute yourself.
Sure. Hi. I've been doing things here and there, contacting my state representatives and the mayor, and I'm a marshal, so I've been to 3 protests in front of the ICE field office. I did accompany Casa Alterna one morning. That was pretty emotional to stand in line with everyone. And a while ago, I did some canvassing in Decatur with Signs of Solidarity.
Thank you, Tracy. Good to have you here. Good to
Thank
see
you.
you. Yeah. Now, I'm not sure if it's Caroline or Carolyn or,
Carolyn, if you're talking to me.
okay, I am. Yep.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Rashi, and I'm recovering from hip replacement, so I'm not doing a whole lot right now. But I did go down to the ICE detention center with Casa Alterna in December, and want to go back and do more of that.
That's great. Thank you. Recover
Sure.
well. Recover
Thank you.
well.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Trina. Hey.
Hi everyone, I'm Trina. I'm tapping back in. I feel like I want to work on things where Spanish language would be needed. Maybe the hotline or going to the detention center. But yeah, tapping back in.
That's wonderful, Trina. And if you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat, that would be great because we do have need for Spanish speakers. I mean, we have need for every single person on this screen, but there's a particular need right now for Spanish speakers. So if you're looking to tap in, we can probably help with that. Thank you. Welcome. Cynthia. And you need to unmute too. Still can't hear you, Cynthia. Take a minute and work on that, and I'll move to Mary Odom. And once you're unmuted, we'll come back to you, Cynthia. Okay? Yeah, Mary, hey.
Yes, hi. I've worked with Casa Alterna at the Gates of ICE a couple of times, and I've also helped out with making bears and have been writing, I've also done writing letters to people on various issues like the ICE detention centers.
Yeah, thanks, Mary.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Cynthia, you're on.
Hi, I live in Tucker and know Carolyn and another friend who have been active with y'all a little bit. In the last 4 years, I've housed two immigrants who are now no longer with me, but I'm very interested in getting involved in something meaningful. Uncluttering my house, giving a lot to Welcome Co-op out here in Tucker.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
we got a bunch of people here who have probably been sorting through your stuff, so, or will be. So thank you
yeah.
for that. Thank you, Cynthia. That's great. Carrie, can you unmute yourself? I know it's harder on phones. I'm sorry. There you are.
Hi everyone, I'm Carrie. This is my dog. I am new to Necessary Trouble and I am still figuring out how I can plug in. I work full time, so just navigating that schedule can be more challenging. But I am a Spanish speaker and I would love to go out to Lumpkin on, sometime that I'm able, and would love to help with the shop or food related volunteer work on the weekend.
Wonderful. Thanks, Carrie. Welcome. Gareth, hey. Hey, good to see you. You are next.
There we go. Hi, I'm Gareth Findley. I have been somewhat lurking and learning for years, and now that ICE is trying to open a detention center only 9 miles from me in Social Circle, Georgia, I have ended up leading or co-leading efforts to try to stop that or slow it, and eventually to probably need to do hospitality with those who are being released from detention there or families of those there, similar to what's going on in Stewart.
Thank you, Gareth. It's amazing work that you're doing. Thank you for that.
Thanks.
Cindy. Hey, Cindy, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Hi. I'm Cindy Lutenbacher. I go down to the Gates of Ice weekly with Casa Alterna, and Gloria is one of our fearless leaders. And just today started with the food distribution that Casa Alterna does in various apartment complexes. And also I do ice chasing and mutual aid with GLAR.
Oh, you are busy. Thank you for that. I just was at Whole Foods picking up food for y'all. Yeah. Susan Cole, another compa. Can
Hi.
you unmute yourself?
Yes.
Hey.
Yes. So, hi, everyone. I also volunteer at the Gates of ICE with Casa Alterna try to do it on a weekly basis. And I, in the past, have done food distribution. I'm also on the Compass Advocacy Committee, and we are trying to figure out ways to affect legislation, or really our legislators, get them involved in inspecting the detention, the ICE headquarters where people are detained, and a variety of other things.
Thank you, Susan. That's really important work. Chris Rogers, can you unmute yourself? Hey.
I can. I'm Chris Rogers. I have been interested in how I can do some work at my workplace to ensure the rights of immigrants, and that is what has brought me here today. I've also done the GLAR training and attended a few other meetings of this group.
Thank you, Chris. Nice to finally meet you. In quotes. Yeah, great. I'm going to skip over you, Melinda. You'll get your own special introduction. Bobby, well, Victoria, you've been on the screen for a while. Tell us about yourself, please.
Okay, hi everybody. I have not done much or anything with immigration yet. I've been working on the election board with Necessary Trouble. I'm also working with Avondale Action, do a lot of protests. I'm a marshal for the big Tucker rallies, so that's, coming up. But I am interested in the food distribution because I have worked with Deem in their food pantry indicator. So I am interested in that. I can't travel that much just because I have a sick animal, but anything I can do, I'll help out with. So thank you.
Victoria, please reach out to me. I'm going to put my information in the chat because Casa Alterna is doing some wonderful food distribution, but there's other mutual aid possibilities for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, great. In fact, if you'll put your name in the chat, that will remind me to do it.
Okay.
Thank you. Anne, we are very, very, very briefly saying what we are doing or might want to do in terms of immigrant refugee work. Hey, welcome.
Hey, I'm been trying to get on. Hey, I'm not doing a lot of stuff, but yeah, I'm doing
There's
a lot
still
of
time.
Clothing distribution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Bobby King, you're new to me too. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Definitely.
Okay, good. Yeah, I am. I'll be very brief here. I worked with refugees in the metro Atlanta area for about 30 years. And in 2016, my wife and I moved to Brevard, North Carolina.
Oh.
And I've been working with asylum seekers for about the past 10 years, most of that in Atlanta, because I go back to Atlanta about once a month and I do a lot of work remotely. But I've worked mostly in sponsorships, trying to get churches and nonprofits to sponsor asylum seekers, and am heavily involved in an organization up here that does Know Your Rights workshop, power of attorney, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, I'm so glad to be on this Zoom. Thank you.
We're so glad to have you. And Bobby, I don't think you are a member of Immigrant Refugee Workgroup. Is that true? If that is true, if you'd put your name and your email address, we will send you a welcome letter.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Now let's see.
Tara?
Yes.
Just to interrupt right quick. Bobby is the person that I'm working with, and he's a part of our immigrant work group already. So
fabulous. Well,
he knows about you.
Well, we can work together, or we just appreciate each other from a small distance. Mildred, if you could let us know what work you've been doing or wish to do.
Hi, everyone. My name
Hi.
is Mildred Pierre. I am a family that's impacted by ICE. My husband, Rodney Taylor, has been in Stewart ICE Detention Center for over a year. He's a disabled man.
Yes.
The work I've been doing is a lot of advocacy work and resource, connecting families with resources. I found that in this space, when Rodney was detained, there wasn't no like business card, there wasn't no know your rights. That came much later. So I was a fish out of water, at least it felt like. And so I find even now, there's a lot of families that I meet through different organizations, such as Refugee. I work with them. I work with Baji. I work with other organizing groups too, grassroots organizing to do rallies and protests. But I found when I meet these families, they typically don't know where to go to start to find help. So I find myself being that middleman in a sense, linking them with resources. So that's what
Yep.
I've been doing lately, and advocating, of course, for Rodney's release. He's still detained.
Thank
So
you
that's
for
the work I've been
that.
doing for a year, a little
Yeah,
over a year
thank
now.
you. And
You're
I
welcome.
think you will not be surprised that many people on this call have gone and helped at protests, etc., raised money. So we're so glad to have you here. So if I've
Thank
missed
you.
anyone, yes, you're really most welcome here. I think we are going to get on with our main show. And I'm really delighted that we have these two wonderful people from GAIN, the Georgia Asylum and Immigration Network, Melinda Ellington Wesley and Amir Naim. And I will introduce them now, since they'll be doing this presentation somewhat together. So Melinda is the Development Associate at GAIN. Her core responsibilities relate to donor relationships, federal grants, compliance, and policy research. She has her master's in public policy from the GSU Andrew Young School of Public Policy, and she is a member of Necessary Trouble's Immigrant Refugee Workgroup. Amir is GAIN's asylum attorney. After graduating from Emory in the history department as an undergraduate, he received a CASA fellowship from the U.S. Department of Education to study Arabic in Syria. He then received his JD from George Washington University Law School in 2015. Prior to working at GAIN, Amir was a staff attorney at Access to Law Foundation in Norcross. He joined GAIN in 2017, where he works to recruit and train attorneys to represent asylum seekers, and provides direct representation to asylum applicants. So thank you both for taking time on a beautiful Sunday to come and talk to us, and I will hand it over to you, Melinda.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for having us on. Can you see my screen? Should be half white, half orange. Great. Thanks for the introduction. Georgia Asylum and Immigration Network, or GAIN, as I'm going to call it. We've been in Georgia working for about 21 years, working with asylum seekers and victims of crime. And our primary mission is to protect and empower immigrant survivors of crime and persecution. And we do this a couple of ways. We do this by providing free immigration legal services and holistic support to asylum seekers and immigrant survivors of human trafficking, of domestic violence, of sexual abuse, and other crimes. And we specialize in humanitarian immigration relief, which was created to offer refuge and give victims an escape from, to be safe from their abusers, and even aid in the prosecution of those abusers. We do our work in three main ways. We primarily provide direct representation for immigrants with our legal services. So we appear in court and we represent their cases in front of USCIS. Our second main way is we recruit, train, and support volunteer pro bono attorneys and help them understand how to represent these cases and to advocate for our clients so that we can basically just expand our reach and have more folks doing the work. And then thirdly, we provide holistic support for our clients. So a couple of years ago, we founded our client care program, which is populated by 3 all-star case managers and our director of client care. And they spend time making sure that our clients, while they're awaiting their cases being decided, have the resources they need to live everyday life, have the resources to have transit to get to their appointments where they need to go, to assist with enrollment in schools, to assist with rental assistance, helping. We have a very small food pantry that we're trying to get up and running, which is one of the potential volunteer opportunities we have. So we just have kind of a full wraparound service. We've really been a legal service provider for a long time, but are working to make sure that we're providing those wraparound services for our clients as well. And, you know, all of this is really important because we know that immigrant survivors are a lot less likely to come forward to speak out against their abusers than native-born folks. And we know that that's also just a really low rate of folks who will step up and try and advocate for themselves to law enforcement and to courts, just because it's a very traumatic thing to do. We also believe that winning a case or a winning case should be a winning case anywhere, not just in certain courts in the country, but we want to give folks in Georgia the opportunity to have their cases heard. And most importantly, we believe in safety, freedom, and opportunity for all. And we want that to apply equally to every one of our clients as it would anywhere else in the country. And just briefly, we have a couple of different types of cases that we represent in court and in front of USCIS. And these are the main ones. We have a couple that aren't on here, but primarily we do defensive asylum cases in front of the courts. We do affirmative asylum hearings in front of USCIS, which is the kind of the more proactive applications from folks who haven't been called to court yet. We do U visa court cases, which are for victims of crime and abuse. We do T visa applications, which are for trafficking victims, both sexual abuse and work trafficking. And we also do VAWA petitions, which is under the Violence Against Women Act, which includes a lot of domestic violence abuse victims and also their family members. And then, you know, one thing just to contextualize, in Georgia, immigrants face a lot higher odds than they do in other places in the nation. There are over 10% of our population consists of immigrants in Georgia. It's over 1 million folks living here, and these are our neighbors, our families, our friends. And one thing to know is that in Georgia, there's just historically been a much lower grant rate for immigrant cases than there are across the country. Historically, the grant rate for asylum applications has hovered around 40%. That has been lower in the last year. But compared to that 40%, Georgia, less than 5% of asylum cases are granted. So it's a really tough court down here, and it's getting harder. And right now it's harder than ever to even have a case heard. The immigration court backlog has been over 2 million for a while, with over 70,000 cases pending in Georgia. And there are millions more at USCIS of the affirmative cases. And there's also a pause on a lot of cases in this administration, meaning that a lot of decisions aren't even being made right now. So folks, even if they've filed their case, even if their hearings have progressed, no one's getting grants in certain types of cases right now. But even despite this, we know that having access to representation makes a massive difference. So even when you have pretty difficult odds in Georgia of getting a case granted, we know that you're more than 2 to 5 times as likely to get it granted if you have legal representation than if you didn't in our cases. So all of this is to say, Georgia, it's a pretty rough place if you're an immigrant or asylum seeker. It's difficult to get integrated. It's difficult to get your case heard fairly, and it's difficult to get relief when you apply for it. So it's just a tricky place to be, but also just makes us feel like our work is even more important. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amir to talk about some of the changes in the legal landscape over the last couple of years.
So yeah, hi everyone. So yeah, I guess I just wanted to sort of briefly talk about some of the things that have changed over the last. I mean, it feels like a couple of years, but it's only been like a year since the education came in. So um, yeah, most of what I'm talking about today is about things that have changed in the last year. Um, there are lots of things that were wrong with the immigration system to begin with. Before this administration came into power. But this administration has gone out of its way to sort of exploit all the different weaknesses in the immigration system um, and uh, and exploit the ways that Congress has written laws. So when Congress writes laws about immigration, many times they're writing these laws in a way that gives the executive branch a lot of power, right? So the executive branch has a lot of authority to, promulgate regulations or policies or whatever it may be. There's a lot of leeway, I guess, within the framework of the law as to like, okay, the government can do this or they can do that. And there isn't really any check on the executive, the executive branch doing what it wants in a lot of cases once Congress passes a law like that. And I guess I explain all that to say that like in the last year, I guess um, there hasn't been like some huge change in the actual immigration laws that are passed by Congress. And there's a few exceptions here or there, but for the most part, the immigration laws are basically identical to what they were before. But what has changed is the way that the government has been interpreting the laws. So they've enacted various different policies, and I'll talk about some of them in a minute. That make a huge difference in how people's what people would expect. When they're going through the immigration process, they have changed their own interpretations of the laws, and that has also had a huge impact on people and what to expect as they go through the process. And a lot of these things are happening sort of very quickly on an ongoing basis, right? So, what's true this week might not be true next week, wasn't true last week, and so that makes it, challenging in a lot of ways, right? It's challenging for our clients, obviously, who are trying to navigate the system. It's kind of the ground is shifting under their feet. It's challenging for us as attorneys, when we're trying to represent people and give people good advice about like, hey, this is what you can expect, or you have to make a decision, and these are the facts that you can use to make a decision about what you want to do with your case. And it makes it harder for people like you all and for the community in general, right? People who are trying to advocate for changes or even just respond to the changes that have happened because things just kind of are constantly moving. And yeah, so yeah, that's sort of a little bit of an overview of that part. So I guess one of the biggest things that has changed is detention. And so immigration detention has for a very long time been a part of how the government handles immigration. And so, as I guess many of you already know, it sounds like many of you have been to some of the detention centers here in Georgia. But the government can detain people or can detain many people in detention centers. Many of these detention centers are run by private corporations, and this is their business. They make money off of keeping people locked up. And so one of the things that has changed in the last year is that the government has placed a much bigger emphasis on detention than previous governments have. So it seems from both what they say and what they've been doing that their strategy here is to just detain as many people as possible. They're working to expand the number of beds available to them, to hold people, to hold potential immigrants. And they're, I think we've all seen, what's gone on in the news, right? In LA, in Chicago, in Minneapolis, and lots of other places around the country, where they seem to be just kind of like indiscriminately picking up anybody who they think might not have a valid immigration status. And So not only have they increased enforcement in that way, they've done a couple of other things. Number one, they've gotten rid of priorities, right? So in the past, the government would have priorities as to like, okay, these are the people that we want to prioritize, deporting from the country, right? And so that could be people from, with a criminal record. That could be people who entered more recently and didn't have ties to the United States, or at least not as deep ties to the United States. There are all kinds of different rationales that the government would use to be like, okay, these people we really want to deport, and these other people we're not going to kind of put their cases on the back burner and not, spend resources on that. And this government has kind of gotten rid of that entirely, it seems like. And so basically anybody that they could potentially detain, they will, if they get an opportunity to do so, in one of these enforcement actions and so forth. The other thing that they have done is they have changed the way that they've interpreted several important laws regarding how regarding what happens when somebody's detained in immigration detention. And so in the past, many people would be able to, if they were detained by immigration, they'd be able to ask for a bond, just like, in a criminal case, if you're charged with a crime, you're allowed to ask for a bond, and, put down some money so that, you don't have to stay in detention while they're sorting out your case. And so that was available to many, if not most people, in the immigration court process as well. But they changed the government has basically changed their interpretation. The law didn't change, but their interpretation of what the law says changed, such that they're now saying that the overwhelming majority of people are not able to even ask for bond, much less receive it after asking for it. And so and I think the government's sort of strategy in doing this, or the reason why they're doing this, I think there's two big reasons. First of all, when people are detained, their cases are accelerated in the immigration court system. And this is not a new thing. This is like a thing, that would happen in the past too. And to an extent, it makes sense, right? If somebody's detained, they don't want to wait 10 years for a decision, on their case while they're sitting in a jail somewhere. They want to get a decision faster, rather than later. And the government is also spending money from their own perspective, on holding people in detention. But in any case, the cases will get accelerated. And so that means that the government can kind of get removal orders from or deportation orders from a judge faster than they would be able to do, for that same person if that person was not in detention, right? So it kind of kicks all these cases into a high gear. And again, this is not a change in the law, but it is kind of a change in the policy. It also seems like the immigration courts are kind of working with DHS on this, right? So like when people get put in front of an immigration judge, I would say like a year ago or 2 years ago under the previous administration, maybe somebody would have 3 or 4 months before they get their hearing on their case. So somebody's applying for asylum, they have to, present their evidence and testify and explain all the different things that are going on in their case. In the past, maybe they would get 3 or 4 months to do that, before they had a hearing, to prepare and to find an attorney and do all those things. Now the turnaround is really, really fast. Like we'll go to court and the judge will say, okay, your hearing is in 3 weeks, right? Or recently we had a client whose hearing was scheduled 2 weeks out. You have a filing deadline a week and a half from today, right? To file everything you need to approve your case, right? And so that obviously makes it a lot more difficult to win, right? People don't have time, especially for people who aren't represented, right? While sitting in a detention center, figure out how they're going to get, evidence for their case and prepare their testimony and figure out what's going on, and all of those kinds of things. So I think that's one goal, or one reason why the administration is doing this, is that it can move things a lot faster than keeping things the way they were before, and having people waiting for a much longer time to get a decision on their cases. I think the other reason is, you guys have seen what the detention centers are like, I think, either in the news or you guys have gone in person. These are not pleasant places to be. And they've become worse, I think, recently, just because of overcrowding, because of the huge number of people that are now being squeezed into a space that was not even designed to hold that many people, and because the government has also gotten rid of a lot of the oversight pieces that were there within the agencies that were supposed to be sort of like the watchdogs and okay, if this is there's a problem with the detention center, we're gonna investigate it. And so it's a way of encouraging people to give up, right? If you're going to sit there, in a detention center and you think, I'm probably not going to win my case because I only have a few weeks to prepare it. And I can sit here and appeal and do all these things and be stuck here for a year, and then get sent back home, or I can just, take a deportation order and be done with it, right? And so we have definitely seen an increase in that. We've had clients who've done that. I think before this last year, I don't think I'd ever had a client that had decided they just didn't want to fight their case at all after they got detained. But I've had several this year. And so it really is making a big difference, I think, in sort of the outcomes. So yeah, I think we'll go to the next slide, maybe. So another change, and again, this is not a change in the law, but it's a change in the regulations that the executive branch sort of has control over, is that they sort of curtailed how much appellate review is going to happen at immigration judge decisions. There is a board, I guess, called the Board of Immigration Appeals, that's within the Department of Justice, and it serves sort of as an appellate court for the immigration court. So if somebody goes to the immigration court, here in Atlanta, and they win their case, and DHS decides that they want to appeal. This is where the appeal would go. It goes to the Board of Immigration Appeals, or they lose their case and they want to appeal. They would go to the Board of Immigration Appeals. And I guess like historically, this has kind of been like a benefit for our clients in a couple of important ways. I mean, first of all, kind of like Melinda talked about, the immigration court here in Georgia is really, really bad historically, and has a very, very low grant rate compared to the rest of the country. And so, appealing to the Board of Immigration Appeals is kind of like another chance to go in front of a body that's not as bad, I guess, as the Atlanta Immigration Court, or it wasn't. And also, it's a way for people to kind of have more time to sort out their case, right? Like if they didn't win their case at the lower level, they would go in front of the Board of Immigration Appeals. While the appeal is pending with the BIA, the person cannot be deported from the United States. So that, their deportation order, if they have one, isn't final yet, and so they can kind of continue with their lives while they're waiting for the decision on the appeal. What this administration did a few weeks ago was they said that they issued a proposed regulation that said that they're not going to the BIA is not just going to take every case anymore. So in the past, you could appeal to the BIA as a matter of right. And so now you don't necessarily have that right. So you still have to appeal. And they said that the BIA will decide within 15 days whether or not they're actually going to like rule on the merits of your appeal, or if they're just going to, be like, okay, no, that's fine. We're just going to leave it with whatever the immigration judge did. So obviously that's bad because, a whole layer of appellate review is gone. And people aren't able to, to avail themselves of that. I guess what would happen in practice then is that you can appeal then the BIA's decision not to take your case to the 11th Circuit, so to the federal court, which is, hopefully a better, another chance to like present your arguments. But there's a couple of reasons why that's still a problem. One of them is, so when you appeal to the BIA, like I said, you can't be deported while your case is being appealed. But that's not true about like the federal court, about the 11th Circuit. So in general, just because you appealed your case to the 11th Circuit, it doesn't mean the government can't deport you, including perhaps to a country where you were like afraid that you will be harmed, while you're waiting for the appellate court to make a decision on your case. That's a huge, obviously, danger that a lot of our clients would be in, especially those who are asking for asylum. So that's another thing that's happened, I guess. I think you can go to the next slide. And this slide is, I guess, a little bit kind of like what I was saying before. The government has gotten rid of like all kinds of like priorities, and so some of the things that they had done in the past, across many different administrations, including the first Trump administration, was that certain groups of people would have deferred action, which means they would be less of a priority for being deported. So that included people who maybe had been victims of domestic violence at the hands of U.S. citizens or permanent residents. People who have been victims of certain kinds of crimes like human trafficking or assault, things like that. Those people were often eligible, or still are eligible, for specific types of visas that are meant to protect them. But those visas take a really, really long time to get an adjudication, or take a really, really long time to get issued, right? So, like it says on the side of it, some of these literally could take 10 to 20 years before you get a visa issued for one of these kind of cases. And so in the past, the government, understanding this backlog, would say like, okay, like, we understand you don't have a visa right now, you don't have legal status right now, but as long as you stay out of trouble, you're not going to be a priority to be, put in this deportation process, because we understand that you have, this relief that you're going to get potentially in the future. And it seems like the government has kind of, done away with that, for the most part. And so, people are subject to detention while their cases are being adjudicated, and their cases aren't going to be adjudicated, within the time that they're detained. And so, people can be and are being, deported, and kind of losing their opportunity to get access to, something that they're legally eligible for. And I think it's important to note, these are also kind of like some of the most, vulnerable people. These are people who have already been victimized, right, in a domestic violence context or human trafficking context. And so, obviously that's, especially bad for those people. I guess the other thing I wanted to mention is, so both DHS and state legislatures have passed laws or regulations that have made it more difficult for people to survive while they're waiting to get a decision on their case, right? So aside from all the detention and all the other things that are happening, recently there was a proposed rule that the government put out that said that they were going to not issue work permits for people seeking asylum anymore, right? And so, I mean, just for context, that was kind of like the only benefit you got while you were waiting for a decision on your asylum case. So, it's not like, these people have access to any kind of like food stamps or other, public benefits that exist for, other groups of people. Kind of the compromise the government had was like, okay, you're not going to get any benefits at all, and it might take 10 years to decide your case. But in the meantime, here's a work permit. You can go work and support yourself, whatever. Which, isn't great in and of itself, but now getting rid of that entirely means that like you kind of put people in this impossible situation, right? Like if you're not allowed to, if you can't get a work permit, and you're not legally allowed to work, like how are you supposed to support yourself for like the literally 10 plus years that you'll be waiting to get a decision on your case, right? And so what it would mean in practice is just that people are going to be forced to, work without authorization, and end up placing themselves in situations where they're more likely to be exploited, right? If an employer knows that this person isn't legally allowed to work, they can kind of treat them however they want, and like, who are they going to complain to, right? And so, that's something that hasn't gone into effect yet, but obviously we're very, very concerned about. And I guess like kind of a related note is also like, at least in Georgia, and in many states, maybe most states, you can't get a driver's license if you don't have a work permit, right? And so, not only are they not allowed to work, effectively they're not allowed to legally drive, but you get places them in a situation where like they're probably going to be working without authorization or be driving without a license, and that is one of the main ways that people end up getting stopped by the police or getting put into the immigration detention system that we talked about before. This kind of like pipeline that sends them on this expedited process towards removal order. So yeah, this section is called Other Concerns, but I think it's just kind of a continuation of what we're talking about. So another thing that has happened, and there's so many things that have happened in the last year that we had kind of like a hard time even like figuring out like, okay, what are the things that we can explain succinctly to an audience on a Sunday afternoon. And so I think this is one of the most kind of egregious things that this government has done. They have implemented these things called asylum cooperative agreements. And so basically, an asylum cooperative agreement, or an ACA, is a treaty or an agreement that the U.S. makes with another country, where that country agrees to accept, a certain number of asylum seekers from the United States. So instead of hearing a person's case, the government says like, okay, instead of hearing your case, we're going to send you to whatever X, Y, or Z country that we have an agreement with, and you can sort out whatever asylum thing you have over there in that country. And so it kind of like forecloses people's ability to even present their case or even explain why they can't go back to their country. And for context, basically all of these ACAs are not with countries that have, functioning asylum systems or, prospering economies, or stable or anything like that, right? I mean, the countries that are part of these agreements are countries where, like, here in the United States, many people from those countries are asking for asylum, right? Like, for example, Honduras is one of those countries. Like, there are many Hondurans in the United States asking for asylum because of the situation in Honduras in terms of political repression or the economy, all these different things. But the U.S. is kind of saying like, oh no, it's okay, you're safe to go to Honduras and apply for asylum there, including for people who have never been to Honduras before in their lives, don't speak Spanish, don't come from countries where they speak Spanish, who have no connection to any of this, right? And so that's something that the government has kind of been doing very, very aggressively recently, in almost every case that we've had recently, where an individual hearing has been coming up for somebody, the government will come in and say like, no, we want you to just pre-terminate this case and send this person to this other country. And then a lot of times they'll be sent to that country, and then that country will just send that person back to their home country, right? So it's not even like an effective way to get any kind of protection, because of that whole, sleight of hand, I guess, that the government is using. And so what ends up happening, just like give context of what happens, right? When the government tries to assert one of these agreements, then the person, the applicant, has to then show that like it's more likely than not that they would be harmed in this other third country, right? So let's say I'm from Afghanistan, I came to the United States because I'm afraid of the Taliban. and I want to apply for the asylum, and the government's like, we don't want to hear about anything that happened in Afghanistan because we're not going to send you there. We're going to send you to Honduras instead. And so now this person has to come up with like an explanation for like why they cannot be sent to Honduras, right? They have to show like I'm going to be harmed in Honduras, right? And that's really difficult to do, right? Especially if you've never been there. Even with an attorney, that's difficult to do. If you've never been there, like how do you know you're going to get harmed? Maybe you won't, right? But like it's just that's not what's supposed to happen, right? And it's not a, you're not going to have access to any kind of like realistic protection in that country. So yeah. I guess the other thing that they've kind of done, and this has to do more with the border, is that they have made it impossible to ask for asylum at the border. So historically, a lot of people who would be requesting asylum would show up at the border between the U.S. and Mexico, and say that I can't go back to my home country because of A, B, and C reason, and the government is supposed to process them, right? Like by law, the government is supposed to process them, right? Give them an interview, figure out if they have a viable claim, and if they do, give them a chance to present that claim in front of an immigration judge. But now that's basically just kind of ended. The government simply doesn't accept, those kinds of requests at the border. So that's one way in which claiming asylum has become impossible, at least for people who are starting the process now, or trying to. Even for people in the United States, the process has become more difficult for all the reasons we already talked about. But there's just more delays in the process, even on top of all these other things, right? So the government has issued a ban on adjudicating certain types of applications for people from certain countries. I think this is like 75 countries now have some sort of ban on their citizens receiving an immigration benefit, at least right now. And so, when I say that people had like a 10-year wait to get a decision on their asylum case, that was before the Trump administration, right? So before all these additional delays and complications and just like, looniness that's happening, that was the timeline that we were talking about. And so, I can only imagine, what that timeline looks like now, if people even get a decision at all on their cases. The other thing that the government has been doing, in many cases, is simply ignoring court orders, or ignoring the law. So, for example, we had a client who was from Afghanistan and had, was in the process of applying for asylum, and before he even had a hearing in his case, the government tried to like forcibly deport him to Afghanistan, right? And so, that was something that's obviously just straight illegal. That's not like a new interpretation of the law or a new like regulation. That's just like something that blatantly goes against, the letter of both the law and the regulations. But they were trying to do it anyway. And so people are kind of always in this limbo of like, okay, the law is really bad. The interpretations of the law are changing and are really bad. But then like at the end of the day, the government might choose to like just not follow whatever law and interpretations are out there anyway. And so that makes the whole process even more complicated and frustrating. Yeah, and I guess so. One of the things that I guess we were asked to talk about was like what are the things that like, concern us the most, and it's kind of really hard to choose out of the the various horrors that the administration has put into place. I think like I guess maybe the overarching things that we're afraid that these things could become permanent, right? I think, whenever Trump, and this is, round two, right, with him, right? So like whenever Trump comes into office, there's a lot of like, understandable uproar about like, oh no, Donald Trump is here and he's doing crazy things. And a lot of sort of pushback that happens like at the time. But then once he's gone, or once whatever administration is on that's done something terrible, people are kind of like, okay, we just want to like move on with our lives now, right? Or, maybe Trump 1.0 did a million terrible things. And so, these changes to the immigration system are maybe not the top priority, right, of what we need to like undo now, right? Because undoing things is difficult, right? I mean, it's kind of the slide here, right? There's all these different regulations that have been put out. There's changes that could or should be made to the immigration laws themselves by Congress. There's all kinds of pending litigation that's happening in front of the judicial branch. And so there's all these different kinds of things that are going on, and it's difficult to undo it. It's not just like you press a button. It's a lot easier to break something than it is to fix it, right? It's easy for an administration to come in and say like, okay, we're just going to break it by pressing this button, but then to like put it back together again is a lot more difficult. Or to make it better than it was before is even more difficult than that, right? And so I guess if we were to say what our number one concern is, I think it's just that we want to make sure that like when the administration is over, there's enough push or enough incentives for people to, put pressure on their representatives, like, hey, you guys have to fix this, and it doesn't happen again, or like it doesn't just keep happening, right? But yeah, that was my part, and I think I will hand it back to Melinda.
Thank you, Amir. So I know that one of the things that Tara had asked when we were talking about doing this presentation is figuring out how folks from Necessary Trouble and the community members can like plug in and what they can do. And I would just want to highlight, y'all are already doing a lot of it. Like we need to see more folks in the community who are passionate about educating themselves, getting involved, getting outside of their comfort zones and building community together. And that's, I mean, you're here. That's a lot of what y'all are doing. Some of y'all are looking to figure out ways to get more involved. Some of y'all are already working basically every day to do this. And that's really one of the more important things. I want to highlight, GAIN isn't the only organization that's working with these folks. We've got a lot of organizations that are providing legal services, a ton of organizations that y'all are volunteering with that are providing help. We highlighted, for volunteer opportunities, Refugee is one of the organizations that we work with a lot. Katie, who could not be here today, one of our staff attorneys, is actually married to one of the staff members over at Refugee. Casa Alterna is doing the ICE check-ins, is doing a lot of direct service with grocery deliveries and transportation assistance. GAIN has a lot of legal volunteer opportunities, but we also have a couple that are for non-legal volunteers that we're trying to flesh out more to provide more opportunities for folks who want to get involved. We've got our Court Watch program, which is an opportunity for non-legal volunteers to remotely tune in to bond hearings, and we're hoping to expand it to other types of hearings. And what we're doing is having folks tune in. They're getting information on how decisions are being made, what the aspects of those cases are, so we can get a broader, more aggregate pattern of what's happening in courts of Georgia. And then we can share that. We have other organizations and other legal service providers who get that information from us and are able to defend their cases with their clients more thoroughly, because they can present an issue with a client that, no, it's not this, I'm not just saying that they didn't like our client for this particular case. Here's a pattern of how this judge has behaved. Here's a pattern of how these courts have deprived our clients of justice, to be able to give more weight to their testimonies. So it's important work, and we're trying to figure out how to more broadly expand that, one, to have more volunteer opportunities, but also to give more data on different types of cases. Another aspect that is really important that you'll hear from every single nonprofit right now is donations are really, really important. Everybody has lost federal funding when it comes to immigrant and refugee work. It's no longer a priority. A lot of human trafficking and a lot of abuse, especially domestic violence grants, are also apparently no longer a priority of this administration. Those grants have shrunk or gone away entirely, which has just created a lot more competition for a lot less money. A lot of foundations, private foundations, have stated that they're either just simply unable to or also unwilling to fill those gaps left by federal funding, which just means there's less resources. It gives a lot more competition between organizations that should be working together, because, we want to keep our staff fed. We want to make sure they and their kids have health care. There's just less resources to go around. And I will say, working with the development team and the fundraising team, I've been really encouraged to see that we've had a lot of individuals and a lot of our community members really step up in lieu of foundations, in lieu of the federal government, giving as they're able. Sometimes you'll have folks who can give a couple of dollars a month, and that's huge, because it doesn't seem like a lot, but when you get that in aggregate, it really does make a massive difference to our clients. And frankly, I think the future of nonprofits in the United States are really going to be dependent on individuals getting really involved. And then I would also say it's really important to continue pushing and learning and sharing and getting the word out to your neighbors, to your family members. A lot of the national coalitions who are working with advocacy, who are working with legal challenges, have been confirming, have been getting the numbers, and have been saying, we know that it's really important to tell the stories. It's, the only way we're changing minds, the only way we're changing hearts is by getting these stories out. So making sure that, as you're getting involved, sharing your experiences of your neighbors and your family and friends with people who aren't really involved, making sure that your family and friends know your experiences when you're volunteering, when you're helping out community members. With a caveat, make sure to omit personal details. Please ask permission when you're sharing stories because it's really important for us to protect our neighbors more than ever. So just when you're sharing these stories, please don't give details whenever possible. Making sure that other people get involved. We need more people. I feel like every time I open my phone, Tara has said hello to a new member of Necessary Trouble, and it's great. I love seeing this group grow, and we need to continue growing. We need to have as many people as possible involved with this work. Frankly, because the administration is counting on us getting tired, on getting us discouraged. They're counting on us giving up, and that's just not something that we can afford to do. And a lot of that will be continuing to push exhaustively against our legislators, to push them to do their jobs, to protect us, to protect our neighbors, and to make sure that everybody is getting the rights that they deserve under this administration.
Thank you so much.
That's all from us.
Thank you so much. Yeah, fabulous. So we do have a few questions in the chat, and you may have seen them. Amir, were there any that felt like you would, at this first, like to answer? And if not, I'll have them just popcorn ask their questions.
We can do popcorn. That's fine.
Okay, all right. So Manette, I know you had a couple of questions. Ask one. I'm not hearing you. Manette, it's weird. Can you unmute?
Okay.
Okay.
Finally got the right button. I think Melinda has answered my questions in the chat. They had to do with, Amr said that restrictions on refugees were going to get more stringent. So I was just asking about the details of that. And it's a memo, right, Melinda? Is that what you said? Or right? Anyway, it's nobody knows what it means yet, is the bottom line. And they're trying to figure it out and talking about pushback and that type of thing.
Okay.
But as we would all be very interested in that, because I know a lot of us are involved with refugee organizations, and there's so many different ways they come in the country. It'd be good to know who this applies to.
Amar, I don't know if you have any feedback on that. I know that we primarily work with asylum seekers. I'm in one of the policy groups for CRSA, so I'm also looped into a bunch of the refugee numbers as well, in memos. And basically, they've had several memos. Again, the law hasn't changed. They've had a lot of executive agencies and even the White House say, hey, we don't want these refugees here. Hey, we don't want these folks, despite them having been legally resettled and are legally protected. So there was a memo that came out of DHS last week or the week before. Again, it's been moving very quickly, so I can't remember which, honestly, basically stating that they needed to, very stringently re-vet refugees. And if folks don't have green cards yet, they need to be detained while they are re-vetted, essentially. And, they've stopped processing green cards for refugees a while ago. And also the fact is that, in order to get a green card as a refugee, you have to have been in a country resettled for a full year. And at that 1 year mark, you can apply for a green card. However, they don't have like a carve out in this memo saying, if you have applied for a green card and you're waiting on it, we're not going to detain you. They specifically have outlined that anyone who doesn't already have it. And since they're not processing new green cards and these folks can't apply for them before that year anyway, there's, there's a lot of very overt decisions being made.
Yeah. Jane, I think that's a really important question that you've asked, because we also share those memos, but we only do it through Signal. So let's go ahead, Jane, ask that question directly.
Melinda, you have shared some legal updates with us in our Avondale small group. So let me ask you if you feel like it's safe for your organization, safe from your point of view, for us to then share and distribute your memos more broadly to other folk.
Good question.
So it's a conversation that is ongoing. And part of the issue is, organizations, me being the first person in my organization, are overcautious of having too much advocacy work, because once you hit a certain percent of your time that is considered advocacy, you have to, in Georgia, either register as lobbyists or you have to change the designation of your organization from a 501c3 to a 504c. I don't remember the letters. We're not that. I don't remember the letters. So part of the negotiation is figuring out how we can couch this as more just like specific information. And then interpretation can be left up to the reader, but also we're trying to negotiate with our board, what they're comfortable being released under GAIN's information, or does it need to start going out under my personal time. So we're still trying to figure that out. At this point, we're not like really widely distributing it. I've spoken with my executive director. I've spoken with one of our board members, and they're comfortable with me sending it out kind of on my own time to Necessary Trouble and to Avondale Action. But in terms of like publishing it more broadly for newsletters, I'm still negotiating with the powers that be who are in charge of our organization. So,
yeah. Connie, you've had your hand up for a while, and then we'll go to you, Bobby.
Yeah, I had two questions, and it's about voluntary departure when somebody's been detained. And one is, do you know if they're really getting the $1,000 that they're supposed to get? And then secondly, a wife of a man who was detained, who did voluntary departure, she had said that he chose voluntary departure since he's going to be, he'd have to leave anyway, that she said that he chose that because there was some ruling that it'd be fewer years before he could try to come back into the States. Do you know anything about that, Melinda? Or Amir?
Amir, do you want to take that?
Yeah.
Whichever.
I guess the first question about if people are actually getting the $1,000, I don't know. They are, from what I know from my own clients, like they have like given them this like, I don't know, instructions or whatever, like, hey, once you get back to, wherever, this is how you can claim that $1,000. I don't know if people have done that successfully yet or not. And then, the second question about voluntary departure, one of the benefits of getting, or maybe the only benefit of getting voluntary departure as opposed to, a deportation order, is that it varies from situation to situation because people's cases can be a little bit more complicated than that. But at least sometimes it means that you would have to wait outside of the United States for less time before you can, ask for permission to come back. Not everybody has a way to ask for permission to come back anyway. So for some people, maybe it doesn't matter. But at least in theory, it's a thing.
Yeah, because I know if somebody like 6 months ago did get the $1,000, but I didn't know if that still happened. And I know two people lately have gotten bond returned, so something's happening. But thank you,
Bobby. I think you're next.
Yeah, I have two questions. My first question, I didn't hear it real clear. Am I correct that the employment authorization document, that there's been a proposal to do away with that? Is that correct?
For people who have pending asylum cases, yes.
That would be devastating.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, okay, so if they do away with the EAD, can people still work?
So what they would do is they would not issue any new EADs, right? So somebody already has an employment authorization document, they're not taking that away necessarily. But I mean, to answer the question, like not legally, I mean, people work without work authorization, all the time.
Okay, so they'd basically be working under the table.
Right.
Okay. All right. Second question. And I know that, first of all, I've done collaborative work with GAIN. You guys do an incredible job. I know that GAIN is not into sponsorship. I'm wondering if anybody on this Zoom works in actual sponsorship, that is, where your faith-based organization or nonprofit or just a group of good people take in an asylum seeker and basically sponsor them, helping them get an attorney, helping them get medical services, childcare, all that stuff.
I know we have a couple of people who have worked with Afghanis for some time now, and then taken them in first and then helped them to get established. But I don't know about anybody on on the call.
And if anybody wants to say, that is a huge need, because as all of you all know, these people have no means of financial support. So if anybody wants to talk about that, I'm connected with some networks that are doing that, and I'm formally on the board of Casa Alterna, so I'm in contact with them. But there's a lot of people on the street, and they need to be taken in, and there's a formal process for doing that. So I hope we can get some folks to step up.
So Bobby, would you put that, how do people could be in touch with you, in the chat? Thank you.
I will make every effort to. I'm going to ask Jane Royal to do that for me, because I'm on my cell phone. I'm going to try it. Jane, if you don't mind, I'm going to try it. But if it doesn't work, if you don't mind, I would appreciate that.
It takes a village.
I will.
Lou, I think you're next.
Thank you very much. Melinda and Nahim, this has been very interesting. I've enjoyed the discussion. My questions are more, what have you seen as far as statistics about deportation in Georgia? How active has the Border Patrol and the ICE been here? And how many people have they deported? And are people being, as you read some places, going to the court to get papers approved and be dragged out by one of these federal agents? Can you enlighten us a little bit on what you see happening and where you think it's going?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't have like statistics or anything, in front of me about like, how many people have been arrested in Georgia or anything like that. As far as like people being arrested at the courthouse, that was something that was happening, several months ago. I don't think it's happening like right now, but that was something that they've been doing. We had at least one client who that happened to, who was detained at the courthouse while attending her court hearing. Yeah, I mean, I think like the biggest ICE activity, obviously we haven't seen like what we saw in Minneapolis and stuff like that here in Georgia anywhere yet. But Georgia's home to 2, 3, maybe more now. Detention centers that are some of the biggest in the country, and so that's kind of like what I guess the biggest piece of ICE presence here, I think, would be that.
And I want to add to that, Georgia, while we don't have numbers, and let me say with statistics, ICE isn't necessarily forthcoming with statistics. They've made it very difficult to get information. Like you can no longer file a FOIA electronically. You must submit it via paper, which just gums up the works, makes it much more difficult to track. Or I'm sorry, you can't do paper, you must do electronic. So it just makes it more difficult for us to get information. And then the other thing with Georgia is we've had the 4th highest number of detentions in the country for states, and the
4th highest.
The 4th highest, and
that's a lot of activity.
It is, and the vast majority of the arrests that happen, as Amir said earlier, is you have a lot of folks who are running into Georgia State Patrol or who are running into local police. And because we have, the law in effect, HB 1105, where all Department of Corrections departments in Georgia are required to report to ICE when they bring someone in, that just increases the numbers. And also we have a very large number of departments who have 287G agreements in Georgia, which further incentivizes them to stop folks and to profile folks. So I don't have the number in front of me. I got the statistic or I guess I got the anecdote from one of the other folks at CRSA who said that the vast majority of folks who have been picked up in Georgia have been through Georgia State Patrol and have been through local police enforcement rather than, large sweeping ICE raids. Like the Hyundai plant raid last year was an abnormality for Georgia.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Dear ones, it is 6:15 and I always like to respect people's time. So what I'd like to say is, one, if you've got questions that weren't answered, if you'd like to put them in the chat, then I would share those with Amir and Melinda, if that's okay, and they can answer those. You could put your email addresses in the chat also. Is that okay, Melinda? Is that a strategy that'll work for y'all?
That's just fine. I put my direct email in the chat just to not gum up my work email. And I'm also in the Signal group, in the IRW Signal group. So y'all are welcome to reach out to me either in the group or directly via Signal.
And folks, if you're not part of that IRW Signal group or even part of IRW, we would love to figure out how to gather you in. And so that you could put some information in the chat about that and we would reach out to you. I know that Martha wanted to also say about the next meeting that's happening.
Minette, kick in.
Oh, yes, I have a whole sentence about it. The Allies' next meeting is April 12th at 5 p.m. on Zoom.
Okay.
So mark your calendars now.
And for those of you who are not, who are new to us, Immigrant Refugee Workgroup has two wings, okay? And one of them is called Allies, and that's what Minette is talking about. And one of them is called IRMA, which is the mutual aid group. And so if you're not aware of that, then we're happy to explain it more by sending you an intro letter, a welcome letter or something. But that's what's happening is Allies is having a meeting, usually on the first Sunday of the month, but that happens to be
Easter.
Okay. So welcome to those of you who have never been with us before. We're so glad you could attend. And really, thank you so much to Amir and Melinda. You really gave us so much information. And we will definitely let people know how they might help you. In addition to donations, I've put that information in the chat for folks. That's very important right now, isn't it? And thank you. And Melinda, Amir, if you could just hang on for 1 minute, I'd love to talk to you. But thank you, everyone. Take very good care. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then I have to end the recording so we could talk.